The man who would eventually build armor capable of killing gods started by banging sheet metal together in a cave. Every single Iron Man suit tells a story of what Tony Stark was afraid of and what he was willing to build to survive it. So today, we're breaking down every Iron Man armor and what makes each one tick, starting with the one that started it all, Mark 1. Tony Stark built his first suit of armor while being held captive by the Ten Rings in Afghanistan, using nothing but salvaged scrap metal and parts from his own Jericho missiles, which is, not ideal working conditions. He wasn't alone. Ho Yinsen, a physicist who recognized Stark's potential, helped him secretly divert resources towards something the Ten Rings never saw coming. Together, they cobbled together a suit that looked like a medieval blacksmith's fever dream, bulky, crude, and borderline ridiculous. But it worked. The Mark 1 featured a rudimentary flamethrower, basic electrical weaponry, and enough raw physical density to shrug off small arms fire. Zero sophistication, just pure brute force engineering from a man who knew he'd die if he got a single calculation wrong. Yinsen didn't make it out. He bought Stark the time he needed with his life, and that sacrifice gave the Mark 1 an emotional weight that no amount of nanoparticles would ever replicate. This wasn't just an escape plan, it was the foundation. Every armor that follows exists because of what Stark built in that cave, but the Mark 1 was held together with spit and desperation, and Stark knew it, which is exactly why the Mark 2 changed everything. Mark 2. Nobody remembers the Mark II, and honestly, that's fair. It's the middle child of the Iron Man lineup, the suit that doesn't get its own action figure or poster. But here's the thing, without it, every single armor that comes after literally doesn't exist. Once Stark got back to Malibu and had access to an actual workshop instead of a cave full of missile scraps, he immediately started refining. The Mark II was built around one core philosophy: make the suit move like a human being. The Mark I was a walking tank. It kept you alive, sure, but piloting it was like trying to do ballet inside a refrigerator. The Mark II prioritized articulation, fluid joint movement, and a design that actually worked with the human body instead of just containing it. But the suit had a problem, a big one. During high altitude flight testing, ice started building up across the armor's surface. The arc reactor couldn't maintain thermal performance at extreme altitudes, and the whole system started failing mid-flight. Stark nearly died, not from a supervillain, not from a missile, but from frost. Which is, not ideal. And that's exactly why the Mark II matters. It was never meant to be a combat suit, it was a development platform, a flying laboratory designed to generate the stress data Stark needed to understand how his armor actually performed in the real world. Every failure, every system warning, every near-death icing incident fed directly into the next build. This is Stark's real superpower, not invention, iteration. Build it, break it, learn from it, build it better. But the Mark III, that's where things finally come together. Mark III. This is where Iron Man actually becomes Iron Man. The Mark I was survival, the Mark II was a test flight, but the Mark III is a statement. First, let's talk about the color. The red and gold isn't just Tony Stark being flashy, it's a direct result of engineering. The Mark II had a critical flaw: ice buildup at high altitude that nearly killed him. Stark's solution was a gold titanium alloy, originally developed for use in satellite thermal shielding. The gold provided superior thermal conductivity to prevent ice formation, while the titanium delivered the structural rigidity needed to survive combat impacts. Two metals that individually wouldn't cut it, but together created something that outperformed both. And it just happened to look incredible, which is, a nice bonus when you're building yourself a new identity. But the real leap here is the weapons integration. The Mark III was the first suit to carry a full multi-vector attack system, repulsor beams in the palms, micro missiles in the forearms, and directed energy weapons, all running simultaneously off the arc reactor. This wasn't a guy in armor anymore. This was a walking weapons platform with a cocktail bar back home, and then Gulmira proved it. Stark flew into an active combat zone, took a direct hit from a tank cannon, shrugged it off, and then destroyed the tank with a single wrist-mounted rocket. He absorbed sustained small arms fire like it was light rain. Conventional military hardware couldn't even scratch him. In one afternoon, Iron Man went from rich guy in a suit to operating in an entirely different technological category from every military on the planet. But at least the Mark III was built for a fight. The next suit Tony made, it fits in a briefcase. Mark V. Every suit up to this point followed the same basic logic: make it stronger, make it faster, make it tougher. The Mark V threw all of that out the window. Instead of asking, how do I build a better suit, Stark asked a completely different question: how do I build a suit that fits in a briefcase? And the answer required sacrificing almost everything that made Iron Man dangerous. The suitcase suit was a radical departure from monolithic armor design. Rather than interlocking large plates of gold titanium alloy, the Mark V used interweaving bands of small, interconnected modular plates made from an entirely different unknown metal. These plates could fold and reorganize geometrically, collapsing the entire suit into a compact briefcase you could carry through a hotel lobby without raising an eyebrow. The deployment sequence alone is worth talking about. You turn a key on the case handle, the bottom springs open, the whole thing flips up and slides into sections. Gauntlets rotate into place, boots lock around your feet, faceplate seals shut. Full suit up in under 30 seconds in a parking lot, while a man with electric whips is trying to kill you. But here's the thing, that folding mechanism came at a very real cost. The thin connected plates could stop small arms fire, smaller scale explosives, and high temperatures, but that was basically the ceiling. This was an emergency civilian suit, not a combat platform, and that's what makes the Mark V genuinely interesting. It's the first time Stark consciously chose to build a weaker suit because the situation demanded it. Portability over protection, convenience over firepower. That's not a step backward, that's tactical maturity. Which is good, because the next suit would need to solve an even harder problem: getting to Stark when he couldn't get to it. Mark VII. Tony Stark's suits had a recurring problem. Every single one required him to physically step into the armor, stand still while machines bolted it on, or at minimum be in the same room as the thing. In a world where alien invasions apparently just happen now, that's not a minor inconvenience. That's a death sentence with extra steps. So he built the first suit capable of automatic deployment and self-assembly. He hits a pair of bracelets. The suit launches from wherever it's stored, locks onto his signal, and assembles itself around his body mid-fall if necessary, which is exactly what happened during the Battle of New York. Loki threw him out a window, and the Mark VII chased him down mid-plummet and snapped into place before he became a sidewalk stain. Not ideal, but technically functional. Here's the thing most people overlook: the Mark VII also featured a significantly redesigned power distribution system. Previous suits routed power through less efficient internal systems, limiting what weapons and tech Stark could run simultaneously. With the Mark VII's overhauled architecture, power delivery became dramatically more efficient. That meant upgraded thrusters, shoulder-mounted mini-missiles for standoff attacks, and laser-guided tracking capable of locking onto fast-moving aerial targets like, say, an army of alien invaders on flying chariots. But the real legacy of the Mark VII isn't any single weapon, it's the idea. The principle that armor should find its operator, not the other way around. That one concept is the seed that eventually grows into the Iron Legion, into remote-controlled suits, into pieces of armor flying across continents to assemble on command. Every autonomous Iron Man suit traces its DNA back to Stark getting thrown off a building and the suit answering before he even hit the ground, and the next suit took that philosophy and cranked it up to an almost absurd degree: Mark 42. Here's the thing about the Mark 42. On paper, it's the single coolest technological leap in the entire Iron Man lineup. A suit that responds to mental commands, flies to you in pieces, and assembles itself on your body mid-combat. Each modular section has its own propulsion system, collapses into small pods when not in use, and can navigate to Stark's location independently through subcutaneous implants in his forearms. If a piece gets destroyed, the remaining sections keep working. The suit can operate as individual autonomous components, attached to other people, and even function offensively as separate flying pieces. Basically a swarm of tiny Iron Man drones that happen to form a complete suit. On paper, this is the future of Iron Man, but here's where it gets complicated. The suit was still a prototype, and it showed constantly. Pieces failed to attach properly, fell off mid-flight, and the whole assembly sequence was about as reliable as a phone with 2% battery. That's not a quirk. That's a catastrophic reliability problem that any sane engineer would refuse to ship. And Tony Stark looked at a suit that literally fell apart on a kid's garage floor and said, "Good enough, let's go." That tells you everything you need to know about where his head was at. The Mark 42 wasn't born from inspiration. It was born from the Battle of New York, from carrying a nuclear missile through a wormhole and barely surviving. Stark couldn't sleep, couldn't stop building, couldn't stop imagining the next threat he wasn't ready for. So he built a suit that could reach him anywhere, anytime, no matter what. The mental command system is genius. The modular architecture is genius. But deploying a prototype that kept shedding armor plates like a dog in summer isn't genius. It's desperation wearing an engineering degree. But if you think a suit that falls apart mid-flight is excessive engineering, wait until you see what happens when Stark builds one specifically designed to punch the Hulk in the face. Mark 44. Here's something nobody talks about enough. The Hulkbuster, the Mark 44, was co-designed by Bruce Banner. Let that sink in. Banner helped build the suit specifically meant to stop himself. That's not just engineering. That's a man looking at the worst version of himself and saying, yeah, someone should probably have a plan for that. The Mark 44 was part of a larger orbital deployment platform called the Veronica system, and it worked by attaching directly over the Mark 43 base armor, essentially turning Stark into an 11-foot tall walking tank. And for the first time in the entire armor lineup, the engineering philosophy wasn't about elegance or efficiency. It was about excess. Every suit before this one tried to minimize mass, reduce weight, squeeze more performance out of less material. The Hulkbuster threw all of that out the window because the opponent didn't care about your elegant engineering. The Hulk can exert force in the millions of pounds. You don't solve that problem with finesse. You solve it with more. The suit ran on a gold titanium alloy with redundant systems built into every single component. Damage one section, the rest keeps functioning, which is, kind of essential when your opponent can rip conventional armor apart in a single hit. The repulsor cannons were several times more powerful than anything on a standard suit, and the enhanced strength systems let Stark physically grapple with a Hulk-level threat without immediately becoming a red smear on the pavement. But the real genius was the modular hot swap system. During the Johannesburg fight, Hulk crushed entire sections of the armor, and Stark just called down fresh replacement parts from orbit. Mid-fight, pieces flying in, locking on, replacing destroyed components while Stark was still throwing punches. It's one of the best visual moments in the entire MCU because it perfectly captures Stark's philosophy. If you can't be stronger, be smarter. And if you can't be smarter, just bring spare parts. But if the Hulkbuster was Stark embracing brute force for the first time, the Mark 50 was him abandoning physical armor entirely. Mark 50. Every armor before this was built from plates. Solid, physical, mechanical plates bolted together with joints and actuators. The Mark 50 threw all of that in the trash. This suit wasn't assembled. It was grown. Billions of programmable gold titanium nanoparticles stored inside a single detachable arc reactor on Stark's chest, ready to flow across his body and form a complete combat platform in seconds. When he didn't need it, the armor simply didn't exist. When he did, it materialized out of nothing, like some kind of technological magic trick. And the Titan fight against Thanos is where this thing truly showed what it could do. Here's the thing about fighting a guy who can bend reality with a glove. You're going to take damage. During that battle, Stark's armor was getting shredded in real time. Chunks of nanoparticles ripped away with every hit. So what did he do? He pulled nanoparticles from his own leg to form a new hand repulsor. He was literally cannibalizing his own suit mid-combat, redistributing matter from one body part to another just to keep throwing punches. His leg armor got thinner so his fists could hit harder. That's not engineering. That's survival instinct, translated into programmable matter. The weapon variety alone was absurd. Repulsor cannons, energy displacer cannons, nano hand blades, nano katars, battering rams, energy mallets, foot clamps, energy blades, nano shields, and nano booster wings, all from the same pool of particles. Whatever Stark needed, the suit became, but the deep cuts are what really make this armor special. The Mark 50 featured a completely airtight seal for space operations with self-supplied breathable air. It could hit Mach 10 or faster, and the suit's self-repair function meant that as long as Stark had particles in reserve, the armor could regenerate damaged sections on the fly. Thanos would punch a crater into his chest plate, and the suit would just fill it back in like nothing happened. Which is, a reasonable response to getting hit by a god. The jump from solid plates to programmable matter wasn't just the biggest upgrade in the armor lineage, it was the biggest conceptual leap. Every suit before this was a thing Stark wore. The Mark 50 was a thing Stark thought into existence. But if you think billions of nanoparticles was the final form, the Mark 85 had something to say about that. Mark 85. This is the suit Tony Stark died in, and everything about it was designed like he knew that was coming. The Mark 85 was Stark's final armor, his 85th. Built as a direct upgrade to the Mark 50's nanotech platform used during the Time Heist and the Battle of Earth, and stored inside a detachable arc reactor that he wore on his chest like a piece of jewelry. The armor literally lived over his heart. Full suit-up time from that tiny housing unit to a complete combat-ready platform was nearly instantaneous. Civilian to superhero in the time it takes to blink. The suit ran on advanced nanoparticles that outperformed the Mark 50 in every measurable category. Greater adaptability, greater durability, greater power output, greater flexibility. But here's where it gets interesting. Unlike the Mark 50's unified nanotech structure, the Mark 85 featured a segmented design that allowed partial deployment of individual components. Stark could form a single gauntlet on his hand without deploying the rest of the suit. Just one piece, anywhere on his body, whenever he needed it. The weapons list alone is absurd. Energy blades, lightning refocusers that could literally redirect Thor's lightning into a focused attack, multiple configurations of energy shields, shoulder-mounted micro-missile launchers with advanced explosive warheads, and a foot clamp feature that could pin enemies to the ground mid-combat, because apparently Stark thought of everything. The suit was completely bulletproof, featured a sealed surface that prevented any form of infiltration, and granted superhuman strength sufficient for close-quarters combat against Thanos. Hypervelocity flight at Mach 10 or faster. But none of that is why this suit matters. The Mark 85 could integrate Infinity Stones through nanotech reconfiguration. Let that sink in. Stark built an armor that could physically house the 6 most powerful objects in the known universe. He designed it to hold them, which means at some point during those 5 years between the snap and the Time Heist, Tony Stark sat in his workshop and engineered a suit capable of channeling the power of creation itself. And then he used it exactly once. But if the Mark 85 was Stark's masterpiece, the next suit on our list might be his most underrated, Silver Centurion. Most Iron Man suits are designed to dish out damage. The Silver Centurion was designed to eat it. Formerly designated Mark 33, this suit was built as part of the Iron Legion following the Battle of New York, and its entire purpose was energy combat. Titanium steel plating on the outside, an advanced energy redirection system on the inside, and a philosophy that turned conventional armor design completely on its head. Here's how it worked. The Silver Centurion could absorb incoming energy attacks and redirect them through its own weapon system. So every time an enemy shot at this thing with an energy-based weapon, they were literally making it stronger. The suit converted hostile firepower into enhanced offensive capability, meaning the longer an energy-based fight continued, the more dangerous the Silver Centurion became. Shoot at it once, it hits back harder. Shoot at it 10 times, and you've basically handed Stark a fully charged cannon pointed directly at your face. Which is, you know, not ideal for whoever picked that fight. The suit debuted during the House Party Protocol in Iron Man 3, one of the most fan-favorite spectacle moments in the entire MCU. Stark ordered Jarvis to activate every armor he'd built, and dozens of specialized variants launched simultaneously to take on Aldrich Killian's Extremis operatives. The Silver Centurion was just one suit in that swarm, and that's actually the point. This armor represented a massive shift in Stark's design philosophy. He stopped trying to build one perfect suit that could handle everything and started building an arsenal of purpose-built tools. The Silver Centurion was optimized specifically for energy combat, and Stark knew it might be suboptimal against other threat types. He didn't care. He'd rather have 30 specialized suits than one mediocre generalist. That's not a man building armor anymore. That's a man building a military. But if you think a suit that feeds on energy is clever, wait until you see what Stark built when the mission required him to not be seen at all. Stealth armor. After everything we've covered so far, every suit designed to hit harder, fly faster, tank bigger explosions, and generally announce Tony Stark's presence to everyone within a 12-mile radius, here's one that does the exact opposite. The stealth armor was built to be invisible, and honestly, it might be one of the smartest things Stark ever designed. The original stealth armor, Model 7, came about because Stark had a problem that repulsor blasts couldn't solve. He needed to infiltrate a hostile location without being detected, not through a massive aerial assault, not by punching through a building. He needed to get in, complete the mission, and get out without anyone knowing Iron Man was ever there. No radar signatures, no energy trail, zero room for the kind of collateral damage that usually follows Tony around like a lost puppy. So he built the suit accordingly. The design prioritized radar-absorbing coating and ECM jamming technology over raw firepower wrapped in a sleek dark paint job, because apparently even stealth armor needs to look good. But here's where the engineering gets genuinely clever. The suit could evade radar, sonar, and virtually virtually every electronic detection method available. It suppressed its own energy emissions so completely that tracking systems couldn't distinguish it from background noise. The suit was essentially a ghost. Try doing that in a gold titanium alloy covered in repulsor ports. It's a suit that acknowledges something most superhero stories ignore entirely. Not every mission is a fight. Sometimes the most effective thing Iron Man can do is make sure nobody even knows he was there. Tactical advantage through absence rather than overwhelming force, which is, you know, refreshingly humble for a man who named an armor after himself roughly 50 times. But if you think a suit designed for silence is impressive, wait until you see what happens when Stark builds one designed to kill a god. Godbuster. Iron Man Armor Model 63. Let that satisfying number sink in for a second, because this is where the entire lineage of Tony Stark's engineering arrives at its logical, completely unhinged conclusion. The Godbuster armor was built for one purpose: to fight things that should be physically impossible to fight. We're talking cosmic level entities, beings that operate so far beyond conventional physics that building armor to stop them is like building an umbrella to stop a hurricane. Stark built the umbrella anyway, and it worked. The Godbuster knocked out a giant controller that had absorbed the cerebral energy of hundreds of thousands of users plugged into the E-Scape digital environment. This thing had the combined mental power of an entire technological network feeding it, and Stark's response was essentially, cool, I built something for that. The armor delivered repulsor barrages calibrated specifically to drop gigantic foes, hit harder than even the Hulkbuster, and incorporated literally every advanced technology Stark had developed across his entire career. Every iteration, every failure, every breakthrough, all compressed into one suit. Here's what gets me about this armor. Think about where this man started. Scrap metal, a cave, a car battery keeping shrapnel out of his heart. He built the Mark I with his hands and a prayer, and it barely got him over a sand dune before falling apart. That same brain, that same stubborn refusal to accept limitations, eventually produced a suit that kills gods. The Mark I asked a question: how far can one engineer go? The Godbuster is the answer, and the answer is apparently far enough to punch a deity in the face and win. From a box of scraps to the edge of the universe, every single armor in between was just Tony Stark refusing to stop solving problems. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more, click the video on the screen now.